The hallway stretched before us, empty and silent, like a tunnel leading to some unknown destination. It was late afternoon, that peculiar time when the sun slants through windows at just the right angle to paint everything in a golden hue. The school building had mostly emptied out, with only the distant sounds of the janitor's cart and the occasional locker slam breaking the stillness. This hallway, with its beige walls and scuffed linoleum floor, had witnessed countless teenage dramas, whispered secrets, and fleeting moments of connection. For us, it had become a sort of liminal space, a place between places where time seemed to slow down whenever we found ourselves alone there. I was walking slightly ahead, my sneakers squeaking against the floor with each step. My mind was preoccupied with the calculus test I'd just barely survived, wondering if I'd managed to salvage a B or if I was doomed to face my parents with yet another disappointing grade. I'm not usually so academically anxious. I tend to maintain a comfortable position in the upper middle of my class, but math has always been my weakness, the subject that makes my confident exterior crack just a little. He walked beside me. His pace naturally faster than mine, though he seemed to be deliberately slowing down to match my steps. Let me tell you about him. Alex had transferred to our school just last semester, bringing with him an easy confidence that I both envied and admired. He wasn't conventionally handsome in the way our school's athletes were, but there was something magnetic about his angular face, the way his eyes crinkled at the corners when he laughed, and how he ran his fingers through his perpetually messy dark hair when he was thinking. He wore the same style nearly every day, worn jeans, band t-shirts, and an olive green jacket that looked like it had stories to tell. Our friendship had developed slowly, cautiously, like a Polaroid gradually revealing its image. We shared AP literature together, where his insightful comments about Fitzgerald and Woolf had first caught my attention. Then came the group project in history, followed by lunch conversations that stretched longer each time. There was an ease between us that I hadn't experienced with others, a sense that we were speaking a language only we understood. As we walked down that empty hallway, I was acutely aware of the space between us, not touching, but close enough that I could catch the faint scent of his laundry detergent mixed with something distinctly him. The conversation had lulled momentarily, a comfortable silence settling between us as it often did. I was about to ask if he wanted to grab coffee before heading home when it happened. He caught my belt loop with his finger and tugged, gently pulling me back toward him. The gesture was so unexpected, so casual yet intimate, that I felt my breath catch. I stumbled slightly, turning to face him with a question in my eyes. Time seemed to suspend itself in that moment. The hallway, the school, the entire world outside of us fading to background noise. The physical sensation was simple enough, the slight pressure at my hip, the momentary loss of balance. But the emotional impact hit me like a wave. My heart hammered against my ribs, and I felt heat rise to my face. In that split second, I realized that the feelings I'd been carefully containing, cataloging as mere friendship, were something else entirely. I should explain why this moment matters so much. In all my previous relationships, the awkward middle school handholding, the few forgettable high school dates, I had always been the initiator, the one who made intentions clear. I had crafted a persona of confidence to hide the uncertainty I felt inside. But Alex's simple gesture cut through all of that. It was spontaneous, unplanned, and it left me wonderfully vulnerable in a way I hadn't allowed myself to be before. Our dynamic had always been charged with something I couldn't quite name. We'd sit closer than necessary when studying together in the library. Our text conversations would stretch late into the night, moving from homework questions to philosophical debates about existence and purpose. There were moments when our eyes would meet across a crowded classroom, and I'd feel a jolt of recognition, a sense that he was seeing past my carefully constructed exterior. But I had been fighting against acknowledging these feelings. You see, I had spent years defining myself in certain ways, fitting myself into boxes that felt safe and familiar. I was the dependable friend, the academic achiever, the person with a 5-year plan. Attraction to Alex complicated this narrative I'd created about myself. It raised questions I wasn't sure I was ready to answer. As I turned to face him in that hallway, memories of our past interactions flashed through my mind. There was the time we'd stayed after school to work on a project, and as the janitor kicked us out, Alex had walked me to my car, our shoulders brushing in the darkness. Or the day it rained unexpectedly, and he'd shared his umbrella, our bodies pressed close as we navigated puddles. Each moment now appeared in a new light, reframed by this simple tug at my belt loop. "Hey," he said, his voice softer than usual, almost hesitant. "Where are you rushing off to?" I fumbled for words, suddenly conscious of how close we were standing. "Nowhere important. Just home, I guess." He nodded, his eyes never leaving mine. There was an intensity in his gaze that hadn't been there before, or perhaps I was only now allowing myself to recognize it. "I've been wanting to talk to you about something," he said, shifting his weight from one foot to the other. It was rare to see Alex nervous, and the realization that he might be feeling as unsettled as I was made my heart race even faster. "About what?" I managed to ask, trying to keep my voice steady. He laughed then, a short, almost self-deprecating sound. "I had this whole speech planned out, you know. I've been rehearsing it for days. But now that we're here, I can't remember a single word." I smiled, finding comfort in his honesty. "You don't need a speech with me. Just say what you're thinking." The hallway seemed to grow quieter around us, as if the building itself was holding its breath. Sunlight streamed through the windows, casting long shadows across the floor and illuminating dust particles that danced in the air between us. "I like you," he said finally, the words coming out in a rush. "Not just as a friend. I mean, yes, as a friend. You're probably the best friend I've made since moving here, but also, more than that. And I've been trying to figure out if you might feel the same way, or if I'm just projecting what I want to see." His vulnerability in that moment was a gift, one that gave me permission to be equally honest. Let me explain why this matters. In a world where we're constantly performing versions of ourselves, true vulnerability is rare and precious. It creates space for authentic connection, for the kind of relationship that isn't built on pretense or expectation. "I do," I admitted, my voice barely above a whisper. "Feel the same way, I mean. But I've been afraid to acknowledge it, even to myself." "Afraid of what?" he asked, his brow furrowing slightly. This was the moment of truth, the point where I could retreat into safety or step forward into something unknown. I took a deep breath. "Afraid of how much it might change things. Afraid that I don't know how to do this, whatever this is, without messing it up. Afraid that I might lose you as a friend if it doesn't work out." He nodded slowly, understanding evident in his expression. "I get that. I've been scared too. But lately I've been thinking that maybe the risk is worth it. That maybe we're missing out on something important by not being honest about how we feel." As we stood there, I recalled all the moments that had led us to this point. There was the time in English class when we debated the motivations of Gatsby's character so passionately that our teacher had to remind us that other students existed. Or the Saturday we'd run into each other at the local bookstore and ended up spending hours browsing shelves together, each recommendation revealing another layer of ourselves. These weren't just random encounters. They were building blocks of something meaningful. "Do you remember that day in the rain?" I asked suddenly. "When you walked me to my car under your umbrella?" He smiled, a genuine smile that reached his eyes. "Of course. You were wearing that blue sweater, and you kept trying to stay at the edge of the umbrella so I wouldn't get wet." The fact that he remembered such a detail made my chest tighten with emotion. "I think I knew then," I confessed, "that what I felt for you was different. Special. Why didn't you say anything?" he asked, no accusation in his tone, just curiosity. I shrugged, trying to articulate feelings I was only now beginning to understand. "I guess I needed time to process it, to make sure it wasn't just a passing thing. And honestly, I wasn't sure you'd feel the same way." He laughed again, shaking his head slightly. "I've been dropping hints for weeks. I thought I was being embarrassingly obvious." "Apparently I'm not great at picking up hints," I replied, smiling. "Hence the belt loop," he said, gesturing to where his hand had been. I figured a more direct approach might be necessary. There was a lightness between us now. The tension transformed into something warm and expectant. The hallway no longer felt like an in-between space, but rather the beginning of something new. The late afternoon sun had shifted, casting everything in a softer glow, as if the world itself was acknowledging this shift between us. "So what happens now?" I asked, voicing the question that hung in the air. Alex considered this for a moment. "Now we figure it out together, I guess. No pressure, no rush. Just us being honest about what we want and how we feel." His answer was perfect in its simplicity. There was no grand declaration, No dramatic promise. Just an invitation to explore this connection with the same authenticity that had characterized our friendship from the beginning. In that moment, we both seemed to realize simultaneously that we were still standing in the middle of the school hallway. Though it was empty, there was something exposed about having this conversation in a place where we usually wore our public faces. "Want to get out of here?" he suggested. "We could go to that coffee shop you like, the one with the weird local art on the walls." The fact that he remembered my favorite cafe, a detail I'd mentioned only in passing, made me smile. "I'd like that," I said. As we turned to leave, he reached for my hand, his fingers tentatively brushing against mine. It was a question, and I answered by intertwining my fingers with his. The simple contact sent a current of warmth up my arm. His hand was slightly calloused from playing guitar, and I found myself memorizing the feeling of it against mine. Walking hand in hand down that hallway felt both monumental and completely natural, as if we'd been moving toward this moment from the first time we met. The empty corridor that had witnessed our revelation now became a threshold we were crossing together, leading us towards something new and unexplored. Outside, the late afternoon had mellowed into early evening. The school parking lot was nearly empty, just a few cars belonging to teachers working late or students at after-school activities. The air had that particular quality it gets in early autumn, crisp but not cold, carrying the scent of fallen leaves and possibility. As we walked toward his car, I found myself thinking about how ordinary moments can become extraordinary in retrospect. This day had started like any other: classes, homework, the usual routine. I couldn't have predicted that by evening, everything would feel different, that the world would seem more vivid and full of potential. "What are you thinking about?" Alex asked, noticing my contemplative silence. "How unexpected life can be," I replied honestly. "This morning, I was just worried about my calc test, and now." "And now?" he prompted, a smile playing at the corners of his mouth. "And now I'm walking across a parking lot, holding hands with someone who just tugged on my belt loop and changed everything." He laughed, the sound carrying in the quiet evening air. "When you put it that way, it sounds pretty significant." "It is," I said simply. As we reached his car, he turned to face me, our hands still connected. There was a moment of hesitation, both of us aware that we were standing at the edge of something new, something that couldn't be undone. "I'm really glad I caught your belt loop," he said softly. "I'm really glad you did too," I replied. And there in the fading light, with the school building standing witness in the background, I realized that some beginnings don't announce themselves with fanfare. Sometimes they arrive quietly, in empty hallways and gentle tugs, in honest words and intertwined fingers. Sometimes the most profound changes happen in the spaces between moments, in the courage it takes to acknowledge what we feel and the trust it requires to share those feelings with another person. As we drove away from the school, toward the coffee shop and whatever lay beyond, I understood that the empty hallway would always hold a special significance for us. It was where we had both chosen vulnerability over safety, truth over comfort. It was where we had decided that some connections are worth the risk of pain, worth the uncertainty of the future. The story of US, whatever shape it might take, had begun in that unremarkable corridor with a remarkable gesture. A tug on a belt loop, a moment of pause, an honest conversation. It wasn't dramatic or cinematic, but it was real and true in ours. And as the school receded in the rearview mirror, I felt a sense of anticipation for all the hallways, literal and metaphorical, that we might walk down together. There would be other moments of hesitation, other conversations that required courage, other decisions about which direction to take. But having crossed this first threshold together, I was no longer afraid of what lay ahead. Whatever came next, we would navigate it side by side, finding our way forward one step at a time. In the end, isn't that what connection is all about? Finding someone who makes you brave enough to be yourself, who sees your vulnerabilities as strengths, who walks beside you down empty hallways and fills them with meaning. Someone who knows exactly when to tug on your belt loop and bring you back to what matters most. Total _char_count, 17,312.